Business Over Beer, Season 5, brought to you by Virtual Kathy, Andres Jimenez, Financial Advisor for Edward Jones, Taps Growler House, Uptown Screen Printing and Personalized Gifts, Better Together Payment Solutions, and Diana Rutherford, Real Estate Agent with Realty One Group Cascadia. Please support these great local small businesses.
Welcome, everybody, to Season 5, Episode 2 of the Business Over Beer podcast. Hey, if you missed Part 1, first of all, go back, watch all of that, and remember, all the interviews are linked below. So all the interviews we've done, they're right here. Click on those links. Do it now.
Yeah, and in this video specifically, we learn more about James Oneil. And James, of course, is the coordinator of the McKibbin Legacy Classic. And we learn more about what John meant to him and really what the whole McKibbin family meant to James. And this golf tournament was really a way for him to honor John's legacy and really be there for the family after John's passing.
John McKibbin lived and died as a man of service, and it's important we continue to build the community the way John showed us. And remember, please, if you like what you hear, you want to see more, you want to get more of Business Over Beer, subscribe, like, share, and most importantly, Prost.
Prost. What was the transition like? So you grew up with the McKibbins, right? And you grew up, with Nancy being your teacher. But at some point there had to be a shift or a transition where you got to know John at a different level, right? This more professional level or this more, I'm not just a family friend level. So what was that transition like for you and kind of how did that manifest itself?
I always try to think back, and I really don't know how that it kind of transitioned to that relationship. I think it just happened. My relationship with the McKibbins was Nancy, Jennifer, Megan, and then really kind of went into John because without saying, I think he did notice that I needed that mentorship. I needed that somebody to guide me. I needed to be able to find somebody where I can talk to about next steps in life. And John was one of the first individuals in my life that I guess recognized something in me that could be of value and of substance and was a motivator. He really, his encouragement, that John, my wife, and my grandpa. I don't know where I'd be in life without him. Jennifer and I had a very close friendship, and it just turned into me hanging out at the house. And I really love hanging out with their family. They're so dynamic, so fun, and joke and kid with each other and have such a fun time. And then that's really how it turned. And I really considered John a father figure in my life, and he was the first person I went to when I was going to propose to Michelle, my wife. He was the very first person I went to tell that we were expecting our first child. Him and my grandfather were the two people I talked to about career advice up and down. What do I do? What do you think about this? And both him and my grandpa were the ones that would call me out of just bad decisions and don't blame others and, correct this yourself. And, but give me that positive guiding and mentorship. And he really, the McKibbin family, I would not have the direction in my life. I would not be where I am. They just were there for me. And it was an acceptance into the family where I could go just be me. There's always, that person that comes to the house, a friend, and they feel like they can't have their true personality. And I could always go there and just be me.
Jamie has been a part of our family and our lives for many, many years. And there is a natural transition, obviously, in the relationship where it started out as, student teacher with my mom. And then he and I have been clearly good friends for many, many years. When I was in my early 20s, so I had lived in DC for a while, and then I moved back home to run a state Senate campaign out of the 18th district there. Jamie was back in Vancouver as well. And so we spent a ton of time together. And I think that was a pivotal time where, because I was living at home, my parents were able to see Jamie a lot, talk to him a lot. And I think my dad really saw something in Jamie. It was that spark, that potential, that he had so much to give. And so I really, and then what happened is that I then moved up to Seattle shortly thereafter, and I've lived in the Seattle area since. But Jamie and my dad kept meeting, and that was kind of that switch where it wasn't about Jamie and Jennifer being friends anymore. It was my dad taking on kind of this mentor role with Jamie, and their friendship took on a total different life of its own. And I think through this last 15, 20 years or so, Jamie he's like part of the family. And that's partly why he's here. He's kind of like the brother that Megan and I never had. And for Jamie to see this opportunity of this golf tournament and to continue to see it through, there was a time when we didn't know that it was going to continue. And yet here it is, like resurrected, bigger and better than ever, and continuing on to do so much important work in the community. Is literally Jamie is continuing on my dad's legacy. And so, I just wanted to be clear, like Jamie is not just here as a family friend. He's here also as a representation of our family. And my dad saw that and recognized that in him. And we're just really fortunate to have him.
James is truly carrying on John McKibbin's legacy because he's built his own reputation for being a true community leader. And him coordinating this tournament and the purpose of the tournament and everything he does to make this such a great event really makes it easy for people to support him. People like Rick Tkach, CEO of Vesta Hospitality, and Jason Beatty of International Graphics and Nameplate.
Well, keeping on the local thing, let's talk about the McKibbin Classic. How did you get involved with that? Were you there from the beginning, or was it?
Yeah, James Oneil. James is really put all that together, and as you know, James is, I think, a phenomenal community leader. I have a lot of respect for him, and he said, hey, look, we want to do something to remember John, and we want to take those proceeds and invest them locally in our community. And so it was a pretty easy decision for me to get involved and try to support his classic and what he's trying to do as best I could.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then you had the opportunity to be the presenting sponsor this year.
Right.
I know that James was looking for a new presenting sponsor. So, kind of what went into that decision? Was there anything else that kind of went into you wanting to do that at an even higher level this year?
So James came and said, "Hey, look, we have a presenting sponsorship opportunity," and honestly, there wasn't a lot of thought. I knew what James was doing. I liked James and trust him, and said, "Okay, I want to do it." So awesome. It was that simple.
So you mentioned James Oneil. Talk a little bit about your relationship with James and why it's important that you continue to participate in this event each year.
Well, I think James makes it easy. When he first came to me and spoke to me about the idea of the tournament, he had a vision and he communicated that vision and he did it with passion. And he was going to put everything he had into it. And I don't think he knows how to not put everything he has into something. That's just who he is, and that's why he's been so successful in this and his career and his family. But James went out and he made asks, and he shared his story of what John meant to him, And there were a lot of people that just right off the bat had that same feeling of John. John had that same experience. I was one of them. And that led to great initial support. International Graphics is not the only one that's been there from the beginning. Their sponsorship has not changed very much since its inception. I think that's a testament to John and his legacy and the commitment for people in our community to honor his legacy, the organizations that it supports, as well as James's passion for making a great tournament, because he has background in golf. He's seen a lot of tournaments. He's seen what works. He's seen what doesn't. And he wants to make sure that those golfers that go out and take time out of their day and put money towards these great causes, that they have a great time. When we look at the calendar at the beginning of the year, the McKibbin Legacy Classic, we're not missing that one. We want to throw our support there. And James puts on an amazing tournament. He does it with passion. He's got great sponsors that love the vision of the Classic. And he makes it easy.
When you're in the hospitality industry, you understand the importance of serving and taking care of people. It's no wonder that Vesta Hospitality is the presenting sponsor of the John McKibbin Legacy Classic. John's dedicated his entire life serving his community and taking care of his family and his home. We learned the origin of the name of Vesta, and the Vesta organization models those same values.
So I read an interesting thing on your website about the name Vesta. So you weren't always called Vesta. Can you tell the story? These guys know I love the origins of business names. I love to ask about business names. Talk about the origin of Vesta and kind of the transition in your brand and why you guys did that.
So on our 10th anniversary, we were looking at redesigning our logo and updating our image and all that kind of stuff, and we hired a firm out of Portland. And not only did they update our logo, they came back and said, hey, because one of my team members said we were thinking about a name change. They came back and did some research, and they found the name Vesta. And they had this logo, and it just hit home, because it's the Roman goddess of home and hearth. And it just hit for us, because that's what we're all about. And you're in the hospitality industry, you take care of people. And if you don't like people and you don't take care of people, you're in the wrong industry. Yeah. So it hit home for us, and we all love the name. So we adopted it, and that's how we've been there now. We've been Vesta now for 15 years.
The hospitality industry is all about serving.
Yeah, it is.
Right? Yeah. And making people feel welcome and at home, away from home.
Right.
So it's kind of like Vancouver is a hospitality of cities, if that's a good, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's very welcoming and making you feel at home, and wanting you to serve. Yeah.
There's a lot in the hospitality industry, but when it really comes, a lot going on, but when it really comes down to it, it's how to deal with people. It's treating your team members with respect and giving them the tools they need to do their job. It's taking care of your guests at a level where they're happy with spending their money, their hard-earned money in your establishments. It's making sure that our investors, that when I find an investor feels comfortable that we're meeting our fiduciary responsibilities and handling that properly. So we have this Vesta wheel, and it's how we communicate with all of our hotels down through the organization. And in the middle of that Vesta wheel, and it's actually a wheel, and we have them in all of our hotels, and in the middle of that wheel is our mission. And then there's 5 spokes to the wheel, and the 5th spoke of that wheel is community involvement. It's best practices. It's your green, initiatives. It's treating your community right and being involved, whether we have money or just personnel to try to support it. And so it's a big focus for us, not only in Vancouver, but everywhere we operate around the country.
Another tournament sponsor, Catworks Construction, and the CEO, Mike Nieto, is focused on helping his people be the best they can be, which makes his company be the best they can be, and in turn makes the community the best they can be. That's another shared value with John McKibbin.
You mentioned earlier about how important it is to you, for you as a business owner, to help improve people, help bring out the best in people. Mm-hmm. So was John like that? He like, from talking to other people about him, he seemed to be very into what you're talking about today.
Yeah, I think his goal was helping, Clark County and and its residents be their best. And so I didn't know him for a real long time, but it's interesting that his legacy stands out the way that it does, which I think is great. But we all have a responsibility to make wherever we live at the best that it can be. I tell my people here at work, hey, you can make this company whatever you want it to be, just start being it. And so it's no different in our community. If we want our community to be a certain way, we just have to lead with it and start showing up that way. So John had a lot of things that he helped support. So why not continue that and help create other things, grow and become better in Clark County. We have a great place to live.
So your dad passed away in sort of one last act of service. Can you talk about that? Can you talk about what happened to your dad and how he passed away?
My dad, I always described my dad. Do you know he was a pilot? And then they go, oh, was he a commercial pilot? And I say, no, he was a pilot by both passion and hobby. He lived for flying. That is who he was. And so when we've talked a lot about our growing up, and when Megan and I were younger, we did a lot of boating just as a family. And at some point there was this time where my dad said, we're going to sell the boat and I'm going to buy an airplane. And I think Megan and I just about hit the roof on that one. We were not too pleased, but little did we know I wish that I do have passion for certain things in life, but oh my goodness, that man absolutely lived and breathed flying. And so he went out doing what he absolutely loved. He was in his T6, which is a beautiful World War II fighter plane that he had restored. It took him 10 years to restore. It was a beautiful plane. There was an individual that wanted to spread the ashes of a loved one. And so he took that up. He took an individual up into the plane to go ahead and spread the ashes of somebody that was important. And we don't know the details of what happened other than they didn't return from that flight. And so we just, I say a lot because obviously it's not a fun topic to talk about. It was life-changing and a horrific tragedy. But we have a little bit of comfort knowing that he went out in the really probably the best way that he could, because he just absolutely loved that plane and he loved flying.
It was woven in the fabric of his every fiber. Like I said, it was he came from a family that was in aviation and loved it from a very young age. And I was in 5th grade when I started flying with him, and spent countless hours just being with him in his hangars, and the smell of it, of aviation fuel and oil and tools. It was like that was him. Like we would often joke, like if we put a bed down at the hangar, he would just be complete because he had
never see him.
Yeah, for all it, which is kind of crazy, for all this stuff that we talk about and all the involvement, you would not believe the hours and hours of his life that was actually dedicated to this other great love. Like his community was one, his family was obviously the center of that, and then aviation. And it was a passion that, like Jennifer said, most of us don't possess in our life for something like this. And part of that was also, involving young people who wanted to learn about it. And he would welcome anyone into his hangar down at Pearson Air Museum or Airfield, and young, old alike. And with that, sharing that love, he also wanted to be of service and be of help to people. And so I actually was lucky enough to spread our grandfather's ashes with my dad out of the same airplane over a place that was very special to my grandfather. And so this was something he had done on a few occasions before for people who, felt strongly that their loved ones would want that. And that was how he operated. He wanted to be in service to other people.
And the night before, he was at Westby and Associates for a meeting because they wanted to start a fundraising campaign for CDM services. And John pulled out his checkbook, wrote an amount, said, "Count me in. Let's get this thing going."
Yeah.
And now you see the McKibbin Center down on Andresen for CDM services. They named it after him. But I remember talking to the people they wrote the check to and they just say, "You know what? We had so much confidence," because when John puts his name on something and he puts his commitment, there's going to be 100% energy going through that. And just night before, it just shows it just never stopped. And Identity Clark County, 3 people now do the job that John did by himself. And they openly admit it. They're like, "I don't know how this guy did."
But I don't know whether it was Jonathan or Ben who originally asked the question about community and whether it was talked about when we were growing up. I don't think it was ever something that we expressly sat down and discussed. It was all by example. And so, when Jamie talks about how he was like, "Let's get this done." I remember that conversation with Mike Wilson, how he said that, he wrote that check and said, "Let's get this started. Let's do it. Let's make it happen." And I can think of countless times in my life where it wasn't a conversation. It was just a lead by example. Like, this is what you need to do. And this is the path that you need to take to better someone else's life. And I also remember it was a casual conversation, but I found it obviously always stuck with me. And I don't know how old I was, probably in high school or college. And he was talking about his goals for life. And, I think I would have assumed that it was like, "You know what, I'd like to retire and, for your mom and I to live well and be able to travel and do stuff." And he told me at the time, he said, I must have been fairly young because he used the word philanthropy and it was kind of new to me at the time. He said, "My goals at this point in my life and moving forward is for your mom and I to be okay financially, and then the rest goes to philanthropy. My life, the funds, and my energy."
Yeah, I remember that too, actually, Megan.
Yeah, it was like, okay, that's not, I don't know what I expected, but I don't, based on how society works, I certainly didn't expect that. And like I said, it was just a very casual conversation, but also very poignant part in learning just how he ticked.
Your dad got it, man. Look, we talk about this. You want to better everybody around you, because if you grow that way, if you grow your group, you grow your community, it's gonna make you better, make you a better person. Your dad got it, man. Like,
yeah, he
legit.
did.
He understood that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That is.
And I think I'll always be striving to get that, because I don't think I'll ever achieve that. But it's certainly something to shoot your
shoot for. Yeah.
Well, and you're small business owners yourself, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and later in my dad's life, I mean, he had to make a living too, and he also was an entrepreneur in a variety of different ways. He had so many different projects. He became a consultant himself. He did a ton of different stuff after he closed out the the official kind of political side of his career. And so it's really interesting to me when you look at Megan and I that we have gone through what we have, because well, Megan mentioned she worked in corporate America. I worked in HR management in large corporations for 15 years before I made that break. And then once we did that, we both landed in small businesses and are, I would say, pretty happy in what we're doing. So it's interesting that that we've both landed in this place when I look at him and go, oh, yeah, I guess I am a little more like my dad than I thought.
There aren't too many people that come into your life that you look up to in the way people looked up to your dad.
Yeah.
It's very clear that he was a very special soul on this planet. And even for somebody like me, like us, who never had a chance to know him, all of the stories that we've heard over the last couple months about him and what he stood for and the work that he was doing in our community, you know, it's strange to say, like, I look up to him and I look up to what he was doing, and it really does. He's still leading by example.
Yeah.
And that's his legacy, and that's what you guys are doing, and sharing your lives with us, and James, what you're doing with this tournament, and letting us be a part of it. It's really fantastic, and we're just super appreciative. We're going to leave it there for now, but before we go, Ben, it's time.
The time already?
Already.
All right. Jennifer, Megan, Jamie,
Jimbo.
It's time for the final question. Are you ready?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. Are we
You're ready. You'll be fine.
Okay,
You'll
we're
be
ready.
fine. We talked t-shirts earlier and getting, name brand t-shirts, right? So you each have a t-shirt you have to design. On that t-shirt, though, it's a quote from your dad that your dad would always say. It's a quote or a phrase or something. What would that quote on that t-shirt say?
Got it. I use this phrase all the time, and I'm pretty sure it also trickled down from Grandpa. By the way, my dad was John Simpson McKibbin IV. So our grandpa was also John, which is good enough for who it's for.
Good enough.
Solid.
For?
Good enough for who it's for.
Solid.
That's a great t-shirt. I want that t-shirt.
I love that. I can see that for sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
Go ahead, James.
Do you know yours? Because I'm just really struggling with this. This is a great question.
I already know, James. Go ahead, bud.
If I don't feel overcommitted, then I'm not doing enough.
I think I've heard you say that the half a dozen times in the last 3 weeks. I knew that was coming.
And then it would be James is taller than he looks.
That's on the back.
Oh, we'll go with that one.
All right. It might have said Dorkarushki.
Oh, Dorkarushki.
Dorkarushki, because that's what he called my kids. He'd say, I'm going to wail on you, you Dorkarushki. Wailing on you is that tickling until you basically can't breathe or pee your pants. So he would do that to the boys, and then he would call them Dorkarushki while he was doing it. So
Love that. There it is.
Yeah. So it might be Dorkarushki.
That's a good one. James, why don't you wrap us up? Why don't you tell us where people can learn more about the McKibbin Legacy Classic?
Well, I mean, you can really just Google John McKibbin Legacy Classic, and you see a lot of different stuff that's been published over the years. But now it's going to be Columbia Credit Union McKibbin Legacy Classic, and I couldn't be more happy because it's a community-minded organization, and they are so inviting to everybody in the community being a part of this. I think that's a great thing about our community. I mean, I was at 2 different events this week, and I would see multiple financial institutions, multiple contractors, multiple food and beverages, all coming together, supporting a cause in our community. And that's what I love the best. Especially, it's just, I think people, once they get together, they understand that we're all here for a reason, and that's to make the greater good for where we live.
Jason and Ben and Jonathan, we really do appreciate it. I mean, Jamie puts all the time and legwork, obviously, into the golf tournament, but you are helping carry on a legacy of our dad. And I mean, just the fact that you asked all the questions today and you spent this time in addition to everything else you're doing. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts and our family, because we really, really appreciate it. And we're glad that you see the value in the time and energy spent. So thank you.
It is our pleasure, and we mean that. We have thoroughly enjoyed it. We've thoroughly enjoyed getting to know everybody surrounding this tournament, and more importantly, we've enjoyed getting to know your dad. And I really mean that. It's been so incredible. It's been way more rewarding than we ever imagined. I think it's important, not just for the people participating in the tournament, but everybody in our community needs to know what's happening with this tournament. People need to understand how great the Vancouver community is. And this is a big part of that. And that's the story that we're hopefully going to be able to tell through this.
Jennifer, Megan, James, thank you so much. Kaylor said it already, but we did not know your father. But if you are any representation of what he was like, we knew him well. And thank you so much for being on our show. Kaylor, Canope, people listening, people watching, I'm sorry. But we will see you all next time.
Good night.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Business Over Beer reminds you to always drink responsibly. Our theme song is Idiocracy by Christian Leo. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Business Over Beer, a TH3 Entertainment production.